And why are you just now mentioning that you're a priest?
Am I not entitled to the same anonymity in the confessional as any other penitent? Father Murphy.
So you know who I am? Our paths ever cross?
Yes. But not for quite some time. If it'll help, I'll give you a name. You can call me Sully.
Okay. Sully. You know, we may be here a while. Mind if I go get a drink of water?
Oh, that's hardly necessary, given that you've a water bottle at your feet.
What makes you say that?
Because it's the truth. Now you're holding it in your left hand, and it's blue.
What's going on here? This confession is over. Now you get the hell out of here before
I suggest you stay seated if you want to live. Listen very carefully.
Hi, my name is Ralph Klishevich, all things creative, and this is episode 1 on creativity. I am here today with Will Times.
Hello.
He's a fellow writer, so we're going to talk about creativity and writing. So maybe introduce yourself.
Sure. So, sort of on the creative side, the inspiration for my creative journey was back in the early to mid '90s. I was living in Los Angeles. That's the heart of the entertainment industry. A lot of exciting things were happening at that point in time, and I wanted to be a part of it. So I took it upon myself to write a screenplay. I was working at a bookstore at the time. I opened up a book, learned about basic format, and just started doing it. Didn't take a class or anything, and something really clicked, and I kept on doing it, and 30-some years later, I'm still doing it.
What have you written so far, and what format do you write in? Is it scripts, short stories?
Sure. So it's a little bit of both. So I've written dozens and dozens of short films, a number of feature-length films, and quite a few short stories.
Let's talk about creativity, and with a perspective on, given the technology, how it's moving more towards artificial intelligence, where does creativity stand now and hopefully into the future?
We live in a world where we each carry around this magic box in our pocket that has basically all the knowledge in the world. Every TV show, movie, music, game that you want is there at the push of a few buttons. And it is so easy to just let things entertain you. I really feel that it's important to be open to not just being entertained, but to soak up the world around you. And you know, when I was thinking about this recently, I was brought to mind a story that I've heard attributed to Kurt Vonnegut. He was obviously a prolific author, but the story was about him going out to buy an envelope to mail off a letter. And his wife said, you know, you're a wealthy man. You can buy a box of envelopes and never have to go out and buy one. And he said, no, but I enjoy the experience of going out there and buying that envelope and seeing all the different people that he sees along the way and the experiences. And a fire truck might go by or a car accident might happen. And that's the kind of thing that gives him the experience and the basis for his writing. And I think that's really important. I try to do that myself when I'm out walking in the neighborhood with my dog. It's very easy to throw on a podcast or throw on some music and just kind of forget about the world for a while. And I certainly do that. But other times I really do like to not turn anything on and look around, look at buildings, look up, look down in different places, because sometimes you see things that you've never seen before, and something just clicks and an idea sparks from there. And when that happens, it can be magical.
I agree with you. I think with creativity is experience and experiencing the world around you and what is happening. You know, often I've seen some other videos, YouTube videos and such, where people trying to figure out where to look for inspirations, and they need, often they reference they need escapes, they need to go on some kind of a trip to different, you know, continent, to different city, state, and what have you, to find inspiration. But most of the time, the inspiration is around you, what is happening around in your world. I mean, you can be living in a busy city like we are in Chicago, or you can be living somewhere in the middle of, I don't know, Utah, in a cabin somewhere in a desert, and it's something interesting. You can always film something interesting. There's somebody, if you're a writer, you can be writing about a character that sits in a cabin in the middle of the desert and has an inner monologue, right? And is lonely. And that in itself can be very interesting. So I agree with you, the experience of your environment. And given the technology, I agree with you with that point as well, that there are often shortcuts to quick entertainment, but to truly be creative, you're right, you have to engross yourself in that environment and be very, you have to observe very acutely.
And I think being open to different sort of experiences, walking around a neighborhood, instead of always taking the same path walking around a neighborhood, try going down different alleys, try going in a different direction, going a little further than you've been, going to a whole new neighborhood. Because for myself, I'm not looking to go out and be inspired by something I saw, a car accident, and then writing a story about that car accident. I might see a car accident and have that be the jumping off point for something that I synthesize in my mind with a grander theme that is something that's been working around in my head.
And I would expand on what you were saying, is that a creative process, the way I see it, is a cumulative process. In other words, it's not this one event that happened as you described, this potential car accident or something that happened on your walk, but it adds up, right? I find that writing, for example, I cannot write more than 2.5, 3 hours max. Then
that's a lot.
Yeah, whatever I'm writing after that is just mumbo jumbo. It doesn't, it's nonsense. Mm-hmm. But often what I do is, okay, 2 hours writing, that's fine. Even though I'm happy where I am with the story, just take the dog for a walk. And then as I'm observing my world, I'm synthesizing. Yes, you're right. I am engrossing myself into the experience of a simple walk with a dog. And things are being constructed in my mind. Things that potentially relate to my story, or they don't. Or it could be also eliminating process too. The things that I've thought as I wrote, I might decide that, you know, these don't really work in a new context, right? So it's a cumulative process. You always, the more you experience the world, the more you synthesize and the more creativity you harness.
And I think it's also important to realize that not every aspect of the creative process has to yield something productive or good. There can be little failed experiments that can plant a seed that sprouts later on. And I've had that happen where I've just kind of written something and it didn't work, and that's okay. But there was something within there that the simple act of recording it gives it a sense of permanence. And at least in my mind, sometimes that will bubble up in my in my thoughts at night or whatnot. And at some point in the future, that might come up and develop into something bigger.
I like the idea because the script, the first feature script that I wrote, The Last Artist, sort of started the same way. I did not have a grand idea for the entire script, but I had a conversation with a friend who described to me his struggle managing a musical band. And those mistakes that he describes were just so painful. And his description actually ended up being the one of the second to last scene of the script, his frustration with the process of managing bands. So yeah, so I think that's also, we need to recognize in creativity that human mistakes, flaws, and shortcomings is part of the creative process.
In fact, that's what makes people interesting, are those things.
So let's relate this to writing, because we're discussing writing in this session. Let's talk about mistakes. Let's talk about experimentation with things that you didn't think were going to work out. Do you do that in your writing?
Yeah, I mean, style that I really enjoy is doing a first-person story, sort of a stream of consciousness narration of something that's happening in someone's life. Not something necessarily that's totally plot-driven, but it's somebody in some sort of situation and just recording exactly what's going through their head at that point.
Yeah, stream of consciousness.
Yep, and that can be a very freeing and fun experience because there are no rules. And, you know, we all have this internal dialogue that goes through our heads that doesn't emerge when we're out in public. When I'm walking the dog, I can have lots of thoughts that are going through my head. I'm not narrating them, saying them to the world the whole time. Right. And we all have that. And what I've found is that can be a really, really fun experience, is to just get into somebody's head. And it can be a character, oftentimes a character that's very much not like me. Right. And that can be a great experience.
So now going back to this mistakes theme, so you were saying the stream of conscious, it gives you an open format where mistakes or formats of any sort are sort of ignored, right? And it's just laissez-faire with anything that you place on a page. And then maybe on the next review, an edit session, then you decide what you're going to keep or not.
Correct. That can lead to a future idea, a diversion that the character went into on page 3 turns out to be a really interesting idea
in itself, right? And that could be a story in itself. See, this is what I'm talking about: the flaws, the mistakes, or you might discover that a part does not work, as you said, in a story, but you can export it, copy and paste it to a different story and start another story, right? This is, I think, what makes human creativity unique. We rely so much on flaws and mistakes. I think the inspiration happens not in front of the paper or computer. When you're typing inspiration, it happens to what we alluded earlier, the experience of the world, how you walk around with a dog or drive here and there, or in a line in store, and then you observe somebody by the register struggling with finding change to pay for milk or something like that can occur. Those are the moments of inspiration. So yeah, the creative process it occurs entirely as we're fully awake, and also when we're asleep too, when we're consolidating memory and things like that. So I see it, the way I see commitment to creativity is, yes, there needs to be inspiration comes at different moments of the entire process of being an artist. If you're an artist, you absorb things, synthesize, experience, and then you want to create something with it, whether it's music, film, or a writing piece. Then the actual writing is the execution process. That is, okay, I had some ideas, they're loosely organized. I am fully committed to this particular scene that I'm going to write. I'm fully committed to these characters. These characters are sitting at a table, they're going to discuss their plan to move to a different country, for example. And off you go. And if you're fully committed and you understand these characters and then you're in that scene emotionally, the characters will write the story for you.
And sometimes it goes like that with me, and sometimes things pour forth from me without a lot of pre-thought, and other times I do a lot of planning, and I will sort of outline what the story is going to be like. So at least myself, I don't have a set process. Sometimes there's
because you have to rely on mistakes and flaws and things that don't go your way. Correct. Yeah, especially for writing. And the nice thing about writing process it's the most out of all the creative things that I've done compared to music and film. It's the most flexible creative process out there because you can always rewrite it.
But writing too is it's always something that's a product of who you are at this moment in time. I reread the very first feature-length screenplay I ever wrote, and looking back on it, there were a lot of cringeworthy parts on there, but that's also a product of who I was back in the mid-90s, which is very different from who I am right now.
That speaks to the experience we talked about. You as an art, because creativity is everything that you do as an artist, correct? So who you are today is much different than who you were 20 years ago. Same
Absolutely.
thing. When I wrote Algo, sometimes I thought to myself, man, I wish I wrote this 10 years ago, but 10 years ago I was a completely different human being, different experiences. So it's somehow the idea sparked up several years ago, and here I am writing it, just finished it last year. So, and I'm still editing it, and it's a process of a year into the edit, I'm realizing there are different things happening in the world, that I have different ideas. Oh, I have to rewrite this scene. There's a section from this chapter, I'm going to move it to a different chapter. And it could be a never-ending process. I could be doing this for the next 10 years. But at some point you have to decide, okay, this is completed.
This is complete.
It's not finished, but it's completed.
And finding peace with the fact that it's complete, and that you may look back on it at some point in time and have regrets. So coming to a sort of peace with yourself that I am satisfied with how it is right now.
You have to understand when the project is complete.
Right.
Yeah, the problem is, when do I stop, right? Because when the film is something we discussed. With the film, this is the footage. I can tweak it with edit, tweak it back and forth, maybe make the scene 2 seconds shorter, longer, back and forth. But it's not going to change the film. It is where it is, right? With the writing, you can rewrite it.
Yeah. But you know, the flip side of that, I think, is knowing when it's not done. Because I know for myself, I'm very aware that a lot of times I will write something, and even on that first draft, I'll be very impressed with myself and say, wow, that's really pretty good. It's done. And you know what? It's the first draft is almost never done. Or it's never done.
I completely agree with you. Same thing with when I was writing Algo, I had this inspiration for 9 months. Inspiration meaning that I was committed to the idea and I just wrote. And I wrote it basically just straightforward, chapter by chapter, linearly, from chapter 1 through 18. And when I finish a chapter, maybe I'll just go back and within the same day or 2 days later, just quick edit. And I thought to myself, wow, this is just flows. This is so good. Then I think I made a mistake to give you that particular draft. And then 2-3 months later, I went back and looked at it. Ooh, this is so sloppy. There's no flow. There's certain mistakes, and it was almost embarrassing. And yeah, so I had to. You have to step away from the writing at least a month or so to really have a perspective, whether this is good or not. So let's actually segue to the next question that I had for you. as a creative person, as a creative artist, how do you judge if the work that you just completed is good or not?
I think an important aspect is having a group, and it can be a small group, but of people that you trust and respect their opinion, and who you trust will tell you the truth. But yeah, having that network of a few people whose opinion you can trust, I think is really vital.
So do you share your pieces with people?
Yeah, I've got a few people. You're one of them. And I really do want honest feedback, because if you don't have that, let's just say I would have a whole lot of first drafts that are not really, or not nearly as good as the finished product.
It's true. Feedback is very important because writing, just like any art form, is very subjective, right? What one even like comedy, somebody might find a piece of your writing very entertaining and funny, and somebody might find offensive. Like, for example, the short piece that you wrote, I love how it ends about this homeless guy, and he'll find peace and maybe a place. His definition of happiness is change of pants and a peaceful place where he can masturbate. Now, when you talk about homeless people and masturbating, somebody might find that offensive, right? But I found it actually pretty entertaining, pretty funny, because it's absurd. I love the idea of playing with something that's absurd.
And comedy can be one of those very, very tricky things, because certainly societal norms evolve over time, and certainly as someone who's a fan of a lot of comedians, they're, like take something like Saturday Night Live. It's been on for 50 years now, and a lot of people who've been on the show express regret about some past sketches that they've had, because they did not age well. And you also have to kind of be at peace, sort of like we were talking about earlier. It was a different time when you were writing 10 years ago or 20 years ago. You were a different person. Well, it's not just you were a different person. The world is a different place than it used to be as well.
And that, I think that is the ultimate judge of all creative work, is time. Because the time with pieces that were maybe very popular within their frame time, in their cultural context, had a short survival rate, right? They were interesting for, say, 5-10 years. But there are certain pieces, monumental pieces, that we read decade after decade or centuries later.
Or are visionary. And it's like this was something that was written, in the 90s that feels very current today. That was sort of outside of its time then.
Okay, so now let's talk about, in terms of writing and technology. What tools do you think are useful? And let's just say beyond Word document on Google, where you can share. Do you find that certain technology, anything that's maybe even AI-based, is helpful for the writer? Or actually, what you mentioned before, could be distracting, because as an artist, we have to be fully engrossed in the experience. What technology do you think would take away from that experience of being an artist and be truly creative?
I think being overly reliant on sort of AI would not be a good thing, and it's something I personally have no interest in. But that's not saying that it can't have its uses. For instance, if I'm writing a bank robbery heist and I have no personal experience as a bank robber, I might find myself, like, part of the writer's job is to, I forget who said it, but the writer's job is to put your character into a tree and then throw rocks at them. You know, you make their life very difficult. So my bank robbery has gone wrong, and I'm trying to figure out an interesting way to get our robbers out of the jam. I think that a useful tool could be turning towards AI or some of these programs to sort of road test some certain ideas and try to create a little bit of a spark for how could I find myself out of this jam. I would personally find that okay, as opposed to I want to write a bank robbery movie. Hey, AI, give me 50 scenarios for a bank robbery movie, and then I'll choose one of those and basically go off that.
I agree. I think that could be almost what you're saying is you would use generative AI to create scenario from which then you kind of assess and then extract and synthesize as an artist. And I think that's a fair use for it. I'll tell you how I used AI, especially when I was writing Algo, which is a world in which we are run by AI.
Mm-hmm.
I used ChatGPT for research. I think it was a very, very useful research tool. For example, there are many books that I wanted to read, like, for example, Ray Kurzweil's Singularity. So I thought, well, that's an important book if I'm going to talk about some of his ideas. I should probably read it. I go on Amazon, and it's like a 650-page book. I don't have time to read that. ChatGPT,
That's going to stall the creative process.
That's going to stall the creative process, yeah. So I said, ChatGPT, summarize this book for me in 20 pages. I found several chapters, chapter 11, 9, and 13, very interesting. Can you expand in 10 pages each one of those chapters? Boom, done. That was very useful. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that I'm missing. I'm not truly understanding what Ray is saying, but I think it was enough to what I needed for my novel.
You know what's funny? You just gave me an idea on my feature script, Bless Me Father. There was a section on an early draft where a character refers to a song that was playing at the time a traumatic event happened to him in his youth, and I was using a famous song, knowing that, you know, in the ultimate version you couldn't use that famous song, and I replaced it with a few lyrics that I ended up writing. And it just occurred to me that I could go on and have a song generated
by AI
to fit that mood and see if it's better than the couple of lyrics that I came up with, because that's writing lyrics is not in my skill set.
It's a creative way of using artificial intelligence. For example, what you can do is write me a generic song that sounds something like it, close enough, and you don't really care that much what the quality of the song is. It's just being used as a component of your story. So I think it's perfect, ideal way of using artificial intelligence.
How about that? We just came up with a good use.
So another good use of you using it. Okay, well, tell me what is good writing.
Boy, that's one of those things that's really, really difficult to put your finger on. You sort of know it when you read it. Think of it, it's sort of a magical quality where I'm wrapped up in a story, and that could be either a tremendous plot or a great character or something like that. And then while I'm absorbed in it, I find myself really feeling or looking at something in a way that I haven't previously viewed something that I can relate to in my own life. And it's already wrapped up in something that I was finding entertaining, and it has an added dimension to it.
Thank you for listening. This was our first episode on creativity. I'm here with Will Times. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And keep creating.